The sooner you reach that point where you don't have to impress people with money, I think you'll be a happier person. We were very much on rock bottom at that point in time. No savings. And the one morning we were looking for money to go and buy lunch. And I was climbing under the couch looking for coins to go and buy bread. What I feel is coming through quite strongly is politics isn't along racial lines anymore. Interestingly, he's forced the debate around B-EEE out into the open. For a long time, South Africa did think it could be the best in the world. We've become so inwardly focused. We shouldn't be saying Cape Town's better than Joburg. We should say Joburg should be comparable to London or whatever it might be.
Cool stuff. Well, good afternoon there, Marc Ashton. Thanks so much for joining me today on the Ridiculously Human podcast, buddy.
Thanks very much. 30 years in the making. How about that?
But it's absolutely crazy. Like, we went to primary school together, and we were just discussing now, like, how long ago was it? It was probably like 32 years ago. And that's the cool thing about the internet, right? It's allowed us to, like, reacquaint with people, or at least just sort of keep in touch with guys, from afar. And yeah, man, I've watched your journey, and like, I was like, man, this guy's doing some cool stuff, over the years. Lost touch, of course, but yeah, now here we are recording a podcast, so really excited, man.
I think it's cool. I think it's weird. Like I was thinking about the gap in time, and when you're standard 5, and you're picking your subjects for high school, you got your whole life in front of you. Kind of fast forward 32 years, and suddenly it's adult parenting, a big chunk of your life has gone past, and it's like, would I have expected to be where I am today if I had to go back in time and just see where we were going?
What is the answer to that one? What were you?
I don't know. Like I wasn't a big one for school. I'll be honest. I didn't enjoy school a hell of a lot. Like if I were ever to go back to school, I would love to be more social. I think it's one of the things I've learned post school. But like I took myself too seriously in school, and it was just. I don't look back on school and say, shit, I missed it. For me, this is very much, it was one of those things that got out the way and kind of grew into myself as I got a bit older.
So it's interesting because, like, just thinking back, like, I kind of remember you being a bit of a shy guy in school. Am I right? Or was that the case?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I mean, like, I was painfully shy. I didn't have a hell of a lot of friends. I mean, we probably had one or two in common, but yeah, definitely painfully shy. My folks were, and it's quite interesting because one of the things when my mom and dad got divorced, actually, is really it's interesting because my dad also had no friends, and he was very much like a male role model for me. And one of the things after they got divorced, like I went to my dad and I said, "You've got no friends. Like, how do we go and find you some friends?" Ended up taking him to one of the dance studios that I was kind of going to at the time, and he like just rocked it. I mean, he just suddenly kind of grew into himself as well. I mean, and he would have been same age as I am now, when he got divorced. And suddenly he found, he was dancing with everyone from 18 through to 80. He found one of the ladies he went out with, but then subsequently also the woman he married. So you reinvent yourself at 40 odd, and I think you realize how important like good solid friendships are over time, and whether you have them in primary school or how you carry them into adulthood. I think it's quite interesting.
Yeah, it is definitely. I feel very lucky. Like, I think I've had a lot of friends that I went to school with that I've kept in contact with as well. So it feels really cool. I was actually asking one of the guys, his name is Douglas Hodges Williams. I don't know if you remember him or not. I think you guys might have gone to high school together as well, actually.
Yeah.
And I was like, do you remember Marc Ashton? He's like, yes. He's like, Flip. I was like, cool, I'm speaking to him tomorrow. Have you got any questions for him? He's like, yeah, I'd love to know how many times he went home at lunch break but you lived right next door to school. No one I know has ever lived so close to a school like you did. Is that right?
That was cool. Yeah. I mean, Branson Primary School, jumped over the wall and went home for lunch, and, in the afternoon, occasionally missed a couple of lessons, but yeah, it was cool. You were right there. It was literally one wall apart. And when you were tired of school, you decided you'd had enough and you went home. So it was. I definitely took advantage of it once or twice. But what screwed me though was that my folks decided to start running the business from home, and that kind of caught me out a little bit. But yeah, we had some good times back then.
Yeah, it's funny. I'm like thinking back to the time, and obviously your memory is like terrible, right? And I was like, man, I do kind of recall going like, I wonder what time he wakes up. I mean, he's so lucky. He probably has to wake up 5 minutes before school starts, and he's there. You know what I mean?
Uh, I mean, I was very fortunate. I mean, even to this day, I'm a very much a morning person. So, I mean, I can kickstart my day at 3:30, 3 o'clock without any issues. But I think by kind of 4 o'clock in the afternoon, I'm starting to tap out. But yeah, give me a morning session. Happy to do it. I'm not a late night person these days.
Yeah, and do you have any like cool, good memories from primary school at all?
Good memories from primary school. Geez, now we're going back. I mean, yeah, I think you kind of have your. Yeah, it's tough to like nail down something and say, geez, that was my standout experience from primary school. Um, I'll give you an anecdote just because I actually carried it into my adulthood, but this was more at high school. I won't give the person's name, but there was a girl that I was having that I would always walk past. There's a Branson High School, always walk past her. And you know, she was definitely trying to make like eye contact with me, and I just completely missed it at the time. And I kind of, and this must have been course stand seven, standard eight, whatever. And the one afternoon, I'm trying to think of the context of, but anyway, so we leave high school now. And I bump into her. I trade a message with her on, it must be one of the social media platforms. And I said, "Is this the girl that I walk past every day?" And she says, "Yes, and you're the boy that walked past me and didn't once say hello to me." And I thought, she's like, "Hey, it's so true that you just never actually go and like take that leap of faith." So I like to think that as I've gotten older, I always use that as my kind of whenever I'm worried about going and introducing myself to somebody or trying to do a little bit of networking, sometimes the opportunity just to meet somebody is right in front of you and you just don't take that leap. So if you had to ask me one standout experience from high school or school, that's probably it.
Yeah, yeah, that's classic. But yeah, it's funny how like certain things stick with you, you know, and it's like sometimes just that one person. And yeah, I mean, I remember like inter-house sports days. Like I think they were normally like on Saturdays, and there were such like big occasions. You know, we had what was it like our houses spelled chips or something like that. Like
Cobra, Hooper, Impala, Proteus, Scorpion, and I know this because we had actually came up at one of the we were at a kind of one of these school fundraisers the other day, and I bumped into somebody who we also gone to Bryanston Primary at the time. I can't even think of context, but yeah, it didn't, and this thing about houses came up.
yeah, you were in Cobra, am I right?
I was, yep,
Yes.
yellow.
Yeah, I somehow remember that. I was like, no way, that's so weird. That's funny. But so listen, you got into day trading at quite a young age, like 17. I mean, I'm assuming you were maybe still in high school at that time. How does a guy that age get interested in day trading?
So the story goes like this. I was actually a little bit, I think I might have been a little bit younger even. So I wanted to make some of my own money and I went to my dad and I brought him the horse racing section, in the old newspapers. And I said to him, "Teach me to bet on horses." And he said he has no idea how to bet on horses, but if you flip it over, there was a stock market page. And he said, "Okay, cool. Here's what we will do as our kind of bonding thing. We'll learn to go and invest in the stock market." And yeah, we started just learning how to buy and sell shares. I mean, at that time, it was very, still very much a clunky process. There was none of the kind of digital trading and that kind of thing. And over time, we started to, we became quite confident in what we were doing. And I started to trade warrants, which were kind of the first real leveraged things in South Africa. And at the time, the stock market was just doing that. So you thought you were very, very clever. Well, I thought I was very, very clever. It worked out quite well because I made a fair amount of money day trading warrants. But it maybe I thought I was cleverer than I really was. But yeah, I had good fun. I traded from, yeah, I'll call it 16 through to 22, 23, and then adulthood got in the way. But I've always had a passion for the stock market. Love doing it. I think it formed a big part of my career. I think it teaches you a lot about yourself as well. I think that you see Forex trading is always advertised or Bitcoin trading or whatever it is. But the reality is you have to be very, very disciplined if you're going to try and make any money trading on the market. Everyone thinks leverage is very sexy. Leverage is very sexy when it's going in your favor. These things can change direction quite quickly. And when we'll probably get into it just now, but when I had to trade to make money, it became something that your like mental headspace isn't in it wasn't in, I didn't get into a good space, and you became desperate to make money, so you were looking for things to invest in, trade in, and the markets that you couldn't manage your risk. And you end up making bad trades, and I've largely stepped away from day trading. I still have an interest in the stock market, but the day trading thing is a very hard game to make some money in.
Yeah, it is. There's something like, I mean, it's a high percentage, like 80, 90% of people that get stuck into day trading will pretty much lose everything they start with, at least,
Yeah.
you know. So it's definitely not a, I mean, you really have to, I guess, go through some training if you want to take it seriously. And then still, it's very much like a mindset and confidence thing. And you quickly learn your kind of relationship to money and relationship to risk and all these sort of things actually doing it.
Yeah, and I think it's so true. Like you don't know and my wife and I have, or my partner and I have a kind of interesting dynamic in that she's very risk averse, but she's been quite successful in her career. And I've had to learn to taper it back as well because I mean, I now have, most of my cash goes into my business. And she's every now and then got to look at me and say, do you really want to take this risk? Is it another person, new offices, new equipment, etc.? And your head immediately says, yes, take the risk. And then you need to kind of dial it back a bit. So it's good experience, and like one of the things that I've done for our kids is we actually set them up an easy equities account when they were kind of, I don't know, 10, 12 years old. So the day they hit 21, they had about, I don't know, call it 30 to 60K that had been saved up for them. And I said, all right, here's 60K or 30K, 60K, whatever the number is. You can go and take whatever risk you want in it. You can go and put it into an education thing. You can go and buy a car. You can go and do this. But you've got the money and you've got this capital to be able to do something and understand what your risk and investment process would be, or risk-taking process will be. And yeah, I mean, it's been interesting to see how they respond to it. And weirdly, giving them the safety net hasn't encouraged them to take risk. I thought that, when you turn 22, you suddenly have a block of money, you'll go and do something with it, start a business, and there's just been kind of like little dipping in and trying things. And so I've been surprised that you would have thought having safety net, you'd go and commit to something, and yet, yeah, it never materialized.
Yeah, yeah, no, it's interesting. I mean, I actually think that one of the most interesting and also most important relationships that we all have is our relationship to money.
Mm.
Not like in a bad way or like a arrogant way or like, check me, check all the cash I've got, but actually, like literally how does money affect your decision making, like because it does. I mean, a lot of people will, you know, they will sort of judge people because of what they have, or they'll lie because they want people to think they're cool, or they'll not do something because they'll be thinking about money. And it's literally every single day your decisions are made around it, and it can, be very positive and very negative as well.
Yeah, and I think it's so. If you don't understand yourself and your own approach to money, it's a life skill. And I've got a mate. He had a big, his saying was always "fake it till you make it." And he's gone through life, and he's bought 13 cars in his lifetime. I mean, he's the same age as me. But every year he was under so much pressure to go and buy the new car, kind of upgrade, etc. And in time it catches up with you. And I think also as you get older, you also start to see through people. You don't so much, if somebody drives past you in, I don't know, a Haval, it's a nice car, but it doesn't really inform as to how wealthy your thought about how wealthy they really are. Whereas I think in your 20s, you very much look at it and say, oh, you're driving a Volvo, why not driving a Mercedes or whatever the argument might be. Um, you reach a point where you should theoretically be far more practical with your money when you kind of hit your 40s. And the sooner you reach that point where you don't have to impress people with money, I think you'll be a happier person.
Yeah, no, absolutely bad. Yeah, for sure. Because too many people are. They're trying to keep up with people that they can't, or they're thinking other guys are doing super well, so they feel really bad themselves. But actually, it's all just a show a lot of the time.
You know, I have a really good story, and it was one of the things. So I was at the time, I would have been the editor of Fin Week, and I was still a baby at the time. I was probably 28, 29. And I had gone for drinks with one of and she's very well known in the industry. She advises people about managing money. We went to the Baron there in Sandton in the one afternoon, and we kind of had some drinks, snacks, whatever it might be. And I mean, this is a person who appears on TV, tells people how to manage money, professional asset manager. And the bill arrived. And I mean, the whole reason I'm a journalist, I'm going out with the people from financial services sector so that they pick up the bill. And she just, I don't know, call it $600, whatever the number was. And she just looked at me and burst into tears and said, I can't pay the bill. And I was like, but you're the person who tells everyone else how to run money. And she says, two kids, her husband had fallen sick, car broken down, life just was terrible at that point in time. And she just said, I just cannot pay 600 Rand this afternoon. And I didn't know how to say it right up front. So I just kind of went through with it. And, for me, that was like a very enlightening moment is nobody's got it figured out. And the people you can look at somebody and have an impression. And we build people up on their pedestals. And one of my friends is a guy by the name of Sean Riley. Sean actually started he represented Twitter in South Africa. But at the time the microblogging was the big thing. I'm trying to think of what Afrigator or whatever it was, in South Africa. And we went for drinks in the one afternoon, and their keynote speaker, cannot remember his name for the life of me, but he arrived there on a Ducati and put his helmet down, etc. He'd just been featured as an entrepreneur on the cover of one of the entrepreneur magazines. And same story, Bill arrived in the afternoon and he said, I don't have a cent to my name. I bought the Ducati because I got a little bit of fundraising and that kind of thing. But I'm really trying to sell a story and tell people that you can be an entrepreneur, but I don't know how to go and bring it across that running a small business is brutal. So yeah, what you think you see and the people you see on TV, nobody's got it figured out.
Yeah, I mean, but it is kind of disappointing though at the same time, like like where people are like effectively faking it, like this guy, he's busy trying to teach people about entrepreneurship and stuff, but he's actually not doing well himself at all. So that's kind of that is in a way he's just leading people on, and he's probably not necessarily sharing good information if that's his situation.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a difficult one as well because you had a moment of success, like it's you win the lotto. If you win the lotto and you suddenly say I'm going to go and buy a Ducati, people say great, you won the lotto. But you see it from both sides. But I think the point I try and get across is that you taper your expectations of everybody. Um, we've as I've gotten older, I've interviewed a lot of guys in kind of financial services and that kind of thing, and often the guy who's in the shorts and t-shirt or the old sweater is just as wealthy, if not many times wealthier than the person in the suit and tie brigade.
Yeah, I totally agree. Like, I mean, I was an investment banker for, wow, 20 years, right? And I mean, most of the guys that I worked with, to be honest with you, well, one, they didn't necessarily have much idea about the market, which is mind blowing in a way. And a lot of the time they were living almost from week to week, And it's not like they were earning rubbish money. They were just terrible with money.
Mm.
And I think that's literally what we're saying now. Like your relationship to money is so important, guys that were earning like £1,000 a day, like they're like Friday comes and they're like, I can't wait to get paid. It's like, I'm like,
Yeah.
are you crazy? Like, what are you doing with your money, guys? Like, so, so it's mind blowing to me.
But I think it also permeates into like work culture as well, which, one of the companies I have enormous respect for was I worked for Media 24 and then went to MoneyWeb, and MoneyWeb was owned by Caxton, so it's Terry Moorman's kind of print assets, which included MoneyWeb at the time. And they had such an interesting so if you came out of kind of Media 24, it was very much, it had far more of a corporate feel to it. And when I arrived at MoneyWeb, you kind of picked up the Caxton culture along the way. And there was such an interesting I had an engagement with the chairman at the time, and he said, one of the things that you'll learn about the Caxton Group is nobody has a PA, nobody has an EA, and you make yourself you make your own coffee in this place. And I think we almost create these hierarchies to feed our own egos to some degree. And when to this day now, if anyone in if anyone in the office wants coffee, the person who's walking there goes and makes it. And it's not that there's a hierarchy that the most junior person must run off and go and bring coffee or make coffee. And I think it's culturally, I think there are a lot of businesses that could do that better.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Is Caxton, what is it, a brokerage firm or
No, no. So yeah, so Caxton is a media business in South Africa.
okay.
If you want to go all the way back to the scandal, there were a handful of media groups in South Africa. There was Naspers, which was Koos Becker. There was Caxton, which was Terry Moorman. And then there was what effectively it's called Arena today. It was Jonick at the time. And one of the kind of defining. So if interesting if you ever follow media, you'll find that Caxton is forever suing Media 24 or Naspers because of a long-standing kind of history between Koos and Terry Moorman. So they have an acrimonious relationship, but it dates all the way back to when SuperSport was launched in South Africa. And SuperSport actually catapulted Koos Becker to give him, excuse me, to give him the money to ultimately take money overseas to go and buy what became Tencent. So it was a game-changing thing for him, but there was fallout from personalities there when that SuperSport asset got developed. So yeah, I mean it's a small piece of media gossip in South Africa, but it has defined it. Yeah, so Caxton owns all of the kind of community papers, your Randburg Sun, your Sandton Chronicle, etc. So they focus very much hyper local, but they happened to buy MoneyWeb at the time because well, they bought in a couple of tranches. They ended up buying MoneyWeb.
Were you interested in English as a youngster at school? I'm just wondering because I mean, getting into journalism, I guess it's I don't know if yeah, if it's something you were interested in or you just kind of fell. Did you just fall into journalism?
So not so. So I'll tell you how I fell into journalism because it's a bit of a roundabout thing. But the answer to your question, I mean, I never had I wouldn't necessarily be interested in English. I read a lot, but my dad was like super strict about the ability to be able to spell and grammar and that kind of thing, and he hammered that into me. So I always had quite a good grasp of basic English grammar and language. What had happened though was and when we touched on the day trading thing, so I had made some money day trading, and I met what became my wife I would have been about 23 at the time, and she was about 9 years older than me. She was running an OT practice at the time, and we decided we were going to go into running our own publishing company. She was going to do something about remedial and special education, and I was going to launch a website around manufacturing for regulated industries. Um, and we threw a lot of money into that, and we ended up blowing ourselves up quite spectacularly. And at the time, she had gone back to Wits to go and lecture at the university. So she was lecturing OT, and I was carrying on trying to get this business going. And very much, so I also dropped out of high school in Standard 9 because I kind of thought I was sorry, I dropped out of high school in standard nine because I was going to go and pursue the O and the A level program that Midrand University was doing. Did the O levels, but the A level thing, there was a licensing issue and it all went a bit pear-shaped. So I never formally finished high school or did a tertiary qualification. But coming back to the original story, um, I'd kind of been successful enough making money day trading up until the point that you actually need to make money for a living. And we were very much on rock bottom at that point in time. No savings. My wife was bringing in the money from her lecturing job. And the one day, so she also had a daughter who had been about 6 at the time. And, she'd been in my ear a little bit, this can't carry on, this can't carry on. And the one morning we were looking for money to go and buy lunch for Junior. And I was like climbing under literally the couch, looking for coins to go and buy bread for the Junior. And she just drew a line in the sand and she said, "This is not happening anymore. You are going to go and get a job." And I was like, I have no idea. Like, I've never thought about having a job in my life. What are you talking about? And like, so now I start looking for a job, and I ended up going for an interview at Succeed magazine, which was up here in Parktown, and they gave me the chance. Didn't look at a CV or anything. They just said, you kind of look at, and then I was very fortunate to get a job with News 24, and the rest was kind of history.
So like, what? Obviously, you were good at what you did, right? And you must have had like a good attitude and work ethic as well, because you don't just go into a job with no experience and do well. Like, what was your work ethic like? What was your approach to that?
Yeah, I mean, I like to think I had a decent work ethic. I think what worked really well for me was like a big part of journalism is curiosity, and being able to go and listen to other people about what they're interested in. So I went to, you'd be able to go and talk to somebody about their business, and you'd then go and be able to communicate their story. And I think I could do, like I was able to interview anybody, whether they were the CEO of a business or a tech guy or an asset manager or whatever it might be. But yeah, so combination work ethic, but also just natural curiosity. I mean, there was never a better job than being able to just go and talk to people and tell their story. And we had the most amazing, particularly as you kind of moved into that financial journalism period. I remember going into the Bidvest AGM, and I mean, again, I was a kippie at the time, and it was the global financial crisis, and going up in the lift, and I had no idea who the guy standing next to me was, but he was actually one of the directors of Bidvest. And he said, like, you won't appreciate it now, but this is the most amazing time to be alive as a financial journalist. And for the next kind of 5 years, the crisis played out. It was one of those jobs where you could literally pick up the phone, you could phone the CEO of a banking group, and he took your call. I mean, there is no other job in the world where you could have something like that. And like we just had a ball at the time. I mean, it was as a financial journalist, I think that just the opportunities were amazing.
So I got a question around journalism for you, right?
Cool.
Is so I'm thinking about like say financial journalism. It seems a lot less say compromised, maybe because it's kind of difficult to sort of fudge stories and numbers especially and that sort of stuff. I mean, it's not impossible. It's obviously done a lot, but it's just maybe a little bit more sort of transparent compared to other journalism like news around what's going on in the world, etc. That sort of news seems to be a lot more compromised and um, yeah, almost like propaganda. A lot of it. What are your thoughts on those two kind of things?
So it's strange you say that because I probably argue that the financial journalism and compromise isn't the right word. It's just the push and the pull factors in it At the end of the day, you need advertising because most of these things exist on advertising models. So one of the reasons that kind of business and financial journalism is always sexy from a marketing or from a publishing perspective is you can go and sell to the big banks, you can sell to the asset managers, you can sell to insurers who typically have deeper advertising pockets. But one of the criticism, or maybe two of the criticisms of media and journalism in South Africa is that they became quite the ability to be sustainable without the advertising became very difficult to support the journalism model that went with it, and something that's never been fixed. And I'll kind of touch on how people are trying to tackle it, but. The long and the short of it was the models weren't sustainable. A lot of the journalists were going and they'll go and do speaking engagements with a bank or the same bank that they're about to write about. And one of the kind of famous stories in South Africa is, and this tells you how difficult it is to be an independent financial journalist in South Africa. The story around Investec and Tongaat. So one of the Investec analysts, he was very, very well respected, and his job was to cover, yeah, it is Tongaat, which is the sugar company. And he actually wrote an analyst note saying, "Sell the company. Management is a nightmare. There's something that's not adding up here." And the leadership team at Investec said, "You can't write this. You're supposed to be, yes, we appreciate you're supposed to be an independent analyst, but this is one of our biggest clients. You need to withdraw your criticism of them." And he did, and I think he was even, I stand on a correction, but I think he was actually put on suspension for a bit. Tongaat promptly goes under and is now in business rescue at the moment. And so everything he said was 100% correct. But at the time, Investec couldn't go and be independent of the bigger, when they so now if Investec cannot have that independence, how does a media company which turns over the same as with the CEO's salary, the Investec CEO's salaries, there's just no way. If they don't like what you're writing about, they are going to wag the stick at you, and independence becomes very, very difficult. And then the last thing, I mean, the reality is, and one thing that's always grated me around journalism models is, the people that are writing about the shares you should buy or personal finances, etc. They don't have a grasp on a lot of those things. So who do you take advice from? I guess is quite, the other relevant question to ask from that. And that's why I think you're starting to see specialist financial podcasts and that kind of thing coming through.
Did you have any desire to go independent yourself?
I didn't. It's so the models became, I've always kind of had quite an interesting relationship, like the insight around the business models. And one of the things that became very kind of obvious as you were going along was when Alec Hogg originally started MoneyWeb, he had a podcast called Boardroom Talk, and it was sponsored by Deloitte. And at the time, and Alec is a pioneer in terms of digital media assets in South Africa. But he was talking, so essentially Deloitte was going, it was the early days of podcasts, and Alec would go and interview CEOs, and it would say, this podcast proudly brought to you by Deloitte. And over time, Deloitte suddenly realized that they could do all of this themselves. And they, in essence, your client became your competitor from a media perspective. And I think that's what's playing out at the moment. I've mentioned kind of a negative thing around Investec, but today Investec has some phenomenal assets. They got, they do a great podcast. They do fantastic newsletters. Their content is as good as many independent journalists or media houses. So it's, the industry has changed over time. But those that have managed to work out how to create decent content and have a distribution model to it can, they can have some serious reach.
For sure. I think one of the cool things now about the world actually is that we do have this sort of alternative media, right? So you and you can speak maybe more freely, like if
Yeah.
you say have your own podcast. And this is forcing um, like older sort of media houses to change their own models. You know, like they're like, because they're losing business share, I would say.
Yep. Yep.
And so it's good to have this competition. Um, and ultimately, I don't know, I see the way I see it kind of playing out is, yeah, the kind of more independent guys are going to actually be the more powerful guys. Like you just have to look at, say, podcasting. You look at a guy like Joe Rogan. I mean, his numbers, what he puts out there and gets downloaded are like the sum of like the top five old school sort
Yep.
of companies like CNN, MSNBC, blah 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 in America, and he just destroys them in terms of the number of people that listen to him. It's very interesting, like the dynamic that is currently going on.
So I'll kind of support that, and then I'll give you another perspective around it. So, I don't, do you know Zach Galifianakis, the
Is he the
comedian?
actor?
Yeah. So
Yes,
yeah, in Hangover.
yes, yeah,
Uh,
yeah. He's
yeah.
classic.
So, and he had a series for a while called Between Two Ferns. And it was the most ridiculous thing. It had literally two seats and two ferns. And he would interview people, and he would get their name wrong, and he would like mix up the movie that they were in or the award that they won. And it was absolutely ridiculous, but it got so much traction. Eventually Barack Obama you went on to the show, and I mean, like, Barack Obama's a relatively, dignified guy, and it is the most, like, it's the most awkward interview. It's about 6 or 7 minutes, so it's certainly not going to, stretch the brain. But he went on it it was one of the platforms he was told to go on as part of his presidential run. And it astounded me. I mean, it's Zach Galifianakis. It's the most ridiculous thing, but it was part of the kind of that independent media reach that just worked for him at the time. So you kind of have that as an example. Then you've got the Joe Rogans of the world. Um, I think one of the things you're seeing in media at the moment is those people then very much play up to their audience. So, Joe Rogan, kind of the one that always stands out for me is the one that he's got with Elon Musk, and they're smoking a blunt on it. And, everyone laughs at that kind of thing, and they say, this is real content, etc. But I mean, they are playing to an audience to some degree. But one of the things that I worry about from that perspective in a South African context is we 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 have a dependence on investigative journalism in South Africa. And part of the reason for it is because we have a poor police service and investigative service. So people turn to the media to say, please go, you must go and investigate this. One of the guys I did quite a lot of work with was Sikanati Manchancha, and he's at Media 24 at the moment. He's just uncovered a story where the Gauteng Pension Agency, whatever I'm missing an acronym there, Gauteng Pension Agency, they've just signed a 1.2 billion rand lease with a company that does not even own the building that they've leased out. There's 1.2 billion rand of taxpayers' money gone. Well, not gone, but it's been committed to, and there's no enforcement that's going to go and follow this up. If he hadn't done the series on it, it would have been it would have just have been one more thing that's gone along the way. Peter Louis Mayberg at Daily Maverick. I mean, he's been pushing this whole IDT story. These guys were paid 500 million rand for oxygen for the hospital groups in South Africa. Money's never ever reached the hospitals. Now these are the most vulnerable people. He has had to go and independently go and chase that up for the last, call it 80, call it 12 months, whatever when it started. In South Africa, Babita Deokaran, she was the accountant who kind of uncovered all of these things at the hospital groups. 2 billion rand of money that just they cannot find, they cannot trace. It's just been paid away to suppliers. Um, and the only person who's followed that is a guy by the name of Jeff Wicks. I mean, he's done a book, he's done documentaries, etc. There is not a single person who's been arrested despite all of the evidence to support that, or not arrested, prosecuted. So, there is the media does still play an important role. I hear the thing about mainstream media and that kind of thing, but people don't, the reason people often push back around media is they don't like what they're actually hearing. Whereas a lot of people, where they listen to their podcast, there's a case at the moment where two of the guys, South African guys, and I think the content's very misogynistic in nature. But they're on the verge of defaming people, and because they're not held accountable to anything. So I think you got to find this balance between new media and kind of the traditional media, but don't discount one for the other.
Yeah, no, no, totally. But I definitely agree, like, but that's the cool thing I think now is like actually they're kind of forcing each other to, find that sort of right balance sort of thing. Um, the Zach thing though, I think that is a skit, but that's not that he's totally having them on. Like he knows what he's doing in that one. Like I don't think he's like being serious, you know what I mean? Like that's totally
No, it's
yeah.
designed to entertain, but the
Yeah.
thing is, when you build an audience along the way, for me, it is the most cringeworthy thing to watch. But you just can't. It's like watching a car crash in slow motion. It is that bad, but it's that like intriguing. I mean, I think he had Charlize Theron on there, he had Justin Bieber on there for
You had
something.
Hillary
Whatever.
Clinton. That was I thought it was classic.
And it's but he's worked out it's just that painful that you just have to keep coming back and watching it again. So yeah, I mean it's people can communicate across different forums, etc. So yeah.
Yeah, I thought he was classic because he's like kind of using his sort of comedic sort of stance,
Hmm.
but he's actually telling the truth, But it's
Yeah.
it's so awkward because if you know the real stories, he's telling the truth, but it seems like he's just acting dumb and being funny. So it's like you said, it's like you're like, oh, you could hear a pin drop now because
But it highlights people are hungry for content, and they will consume it in different ways. And if the way they want to consume it is two freaking ferns and Zach Galifianakis in the middle, then that's what it is. And people will go and find ways to do it. And whether it's Joe Rogan, and I think there's this whole, one thing that does also worry me is about, everyone wants immediacy and they want the entertainment. And I think if you look kind of the politicians in, if you talk about South Africa, but I mean specifically in the US at the moment, politicians are there for a soundbite and they know that they will be amplified on the channels that are friendly to them.
yeah, for sure. I mean, American politics in general is like, it literally is a kind of show, like movie kind of vibe. Like it's just, it's a performance. That's what it is, like their debates and the talks that they go and give, the rallies that they hold. And it's like, man, what are you guys doing? Like this is literally like you guys are supposed to be kind of running countries and stuff, but you now have like, half of the time you're president, like you are actually just going out there, sort of gathering interest. Like to me, it's like, are you guys doing a job? Are you performers? What is the story here? It's crazy.
And I'd like to the US for me. I love The Simpsons. So if you want like a kind of TV series, I love The Simpsons. And the fact that The Simpsons could predict that Donald Trump was going to be president of the US, I think it was 15 years before it happened the first time. It captures society in the US, and it's weird that you think about it, but South Park I think it's South Park now. They're one of the ones that are so, Trump is having a go at all of the late night comedians, and they simply can't respond to him because he's just able to rally people behind. But nobody can hate South Park. And so they are just they have an absolute free fall, and he can't point a finger and say don't like South Park because people just love it, and it's able to push back. But I mean, for goodness sake, if The Simpsons and South Park are defining or your moral high ground, I mean, it does say something.
It's so true, but I mean, there's like it's definitely more than one occasion, probably like 30 occasions where the Simpsons and South Park have like you said, they've been these sort of soothsayers, and you just
Yeah.
watch the episodes and you're like, What? That's actually happening now.
I love it. I think it just intrigues me, but it is, yeah, you do wonder about the state of humanity.
Yeah, for sure. So talking about the state of humanity, like South Africa is obviously, man, it's an interesting place, right? And like I've come back to South Africa now after 26 years of being away. And I was away just because I was like on an adventure, you know, living, working, etc., for no other reason. And came back to South Africa just on a holiday and decided to stay because I was like, I was like, wow, this is not as bad as everyone says it is. I think Joburg is sort of not that great, to be totally honest with you. But here down in the Western Cape, it's definitely amazing. And the world seems like a place now. It's kind of like pick your poison. It's not like you can go to one place and everything's amazing. There's definitely a lot of things bubbling under everywhere.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on kind of South Africa? Because we chatted a bit about this over email, and you said you're currently quite optimistic.
Yeah, so I mean, optimistic is a relative term, but I'm optimistic about South Africa because I think we've hit a type of bottom. I think one of the things that has been missing in South Africa for a long time is people haven't felt like they have any agency or voice. Unfortunately, the way our political structures were set up in South Africa. We had people, we had a hyper dominant political party who could not be held accountable for anything over time. And every time you tried to push back against them, they were able to pull the freedom fighting thing. They were they represented the majority in the country. And they very much treated this idea that that the country was divided along racial lines, very simplistically along racial lines, and anybody who was anti them was effectively anti-black in South Africa, and what there had been happening is they'd steadily been losing support in across their various constituencies, and people started to realize, and I think it really came through in the last elections, is the ANC, as it was structured or is structured, is effectively a bunch of parties that have been cobbled together along the way. And what I feel is coming through quite strongly is the politics isn't along racial lines anymore. I mean, yes, there's things that you can always jump on and take issue with, but the reality is, people, one, you have a middle class that is predominantly black now in South Africa, and they want the best for their country. I mean, South Africa, white South Africa, as much as we know that they do have that they're well-to-do from a financial perspective, they're by far and away a minority. So you have a black middle class. You have people who say, I'm not voting for somebody because, my parents voted for them. I want the best person in the job. And I called it so. My mate Simon Brown and I have got we do an annual podcast with Keith McLachlan, who's one of the asset managers, and I made a prediction the ANC would hit 40% last year in the elections, and I think I was off by 0.5% or whatever it was. But you could just see the momentum is building against the ANC as an organization. People are suddenly saying, I can have a voice. I can vote for Action SA, the DA, Freedom Front, Gayton McKenzie with the PA, etc. And it's starting to hold people accountable. I mean, one of the things I'm loving at the moment is just Parliament. The other day there was this whole thing about the seaters. I'm not going to go too much into it, but Minister of Higher Education sat there and said, I don't answer to Parliament." And there was just this stunned silence that the Minister of Higher Education says they don't respond to Parliament, and it becomes such an ingrained attitude from a lot of the politicians. And then, she was stunned when 3 weeks later, and it could have been done a hell of a lot earlier, but, she got fired. And, those kind of things give me a bit of hope that we are starting to break down a lot of these historical things where people have been so hyper dominant, there's been no accountability. SARS is starting to work again, even though we might not like SARS working. But there are institutions that are starting to kick in, and we're a noisy democracy.
And what do you think about the sort of pressure that's been applied on SA from, say, like a tariffs perspective, and our almost lack of reaction to that?
So I think the thing that's more interesting is one, I don't think Donald Trump understands how tariffs work, but that's my own kind of view on it. I mean, I don't think he realizes that actually it's moving the impact onto kind of US consumers. I understand what he's arguing, but I think the execution, like people are realizing from an execution perspective, is not perfect. But one of the things that's been really interesting for me is over the last 7 years, I've been consulting quite a lot in the B-EEE space with one of the incentives that's here in South Africa. And interestingly, like he's forced the debate around B-EEE out into the open. And people are actually sitting here, and irrespective of race, there are South Africans that are now turning around and saying, but hold on a second, why do we need BEE? And we can see whether it's the US multinational companies that are operating in South Africa. And I think they've kind of said, I don't understand why. So Starlink is obviously the topical one at the moment. Why must I give up 30% of my business to strategic partners who don't put in skills or money? Why must I spend between 1 and 5% of my annual turnover funding businesses that don't even fit into my supply chain? Why must I spend 1.5% of my annual headcount, my annual payroll on skills development when skills are going nowhere in South Africa? And if you look at the kind of narrative around BEE, Donald Trump has given it the impetus, and a lot of people are now finding their voices. And we can see it across our client base, but we can see it across multinationals operating here. People are saying, but just because we've done this for the last 20 odd years, why do we have to do it, and why do we need this frictional cost associated with it?
So you're seeing it like I guess, like a good movement, sort of,
Hmm.
or resistance towards it.
Yeah, so I see it as a net positive. I mean, I think that wherever you look at the research shows that BEE adds a frictional cost to businesses in South Africa. Whether you give up the 30% ownership, whether you're giving up 5% of your net profit after tax, whether you give up your skills development spend, whatever it might be, the cost of doing business and then finding black-owned businesses to move into certain value chains have made it and state procurement is a very good example. The state is having to pay nearly 30% more in certain cases for services simply because they've got to find be suitable companies to go with it. So people are having some very serious discussions about BEE, and a lot of the there's an argument that only a handful of beneficiaries are actually receiving the funding, that have actually benefited from it. So I think there is people are just saying, let's do something a little bit different.
Do you not think there's like a quality issue as well? Like when you force something, like when you force somebody to work in, say, a business that they're not necessarily like skilled at, right? And it's got zero to do with like color, like just your actual expertise level. But unfortunately in South Africa, that's what it's about, right? So like you when you don't have the right people doing the job that they're supposed to be doing, then your sort of quality sort of and your performance decreases as well.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
So if you look at I mean, I always find this fascinating. So you look at the leadership teams that have been put in charge of Johannesburg. Johannesburg should be our mutual friend Wayne. I remember just before he left for the UK, he actually laid a complaint with, I'm sure it was Wayne, but he with the Advertising Standards Authority in South Africa because they used the tagline "a world-class African city." And this would have been 20 years ago, and he was already making the point that infrastructure was starting to deteriorate. And he said, Johannesburg's not a world-class city anymore. I think he got shot down, but it was interesting to think about it the other day. The people in charge of the water budgets, the electricity budgets, the the hospital budgets, etc. A lot of them are not, they're not professional public servants. They've not studied this. They're there because of patronage networks that have been put in place and will take years to break down. And I, my hope is that, as it, I almost, I said it to you just before we came on here, like it's almost become trendy for politicians to do good now. For me, terrible example, and I'm sure I'm going to get like some flack for this, but Gayton McKenzie, for those who know the South African environment, Gayton McKenzie is him and his friend Kenny Kunene are both they were convicted criminals, and Gayton McKenzie won he came out, he kind of made some money, but then he ended up winning one of the small municipalities in the Northern Cape, I think. And he just went about this whole thing about, I'm actually going to be a public servant that people can see. I'm going to help them plant trees. I'm going to go and paint the thing. He built momentum for what became the Patriotic Alliance. But one of the things that people were saying, that won him a lot of friends going into the election last year. There's a terrible. It's funny. It's terrible. It's South Africa in a nutshell. But Gayton McKenzie and his mates from the PA are now guarding the South African borders from Zim. And every time they see some of the guys swimming across, Gayton McKenzie's running down and he's saying foot sack, and he's chasing them back across the border. But it sounds really like weird, but it resonated with South Africans that he was an oak who was like he was going to get on his own. He was going to get in here and he was going to roll up his sleeves and he was going to go and chase every Zimbabwean who came to South Africa. He was going to go and chase them back because they were illegal immigrants, rightly or wrongly. It was a thing that just resonated, and people have started to say, but it could actually be quite cool if some of the politicians actually put their constituencies first, and that gives me a little bit of hope one way or the other that maybe there are some positive vibes still coming through.
Yeah, no, for sure. So if you say you were like in charge, right? Or what are say a couple of things you would focus on to get South Africa to get it out of where it currently is, you know?
So I think one of the things that we learned out of COVID, I mean, I hate it. Like I wasn't a big believer in COVID, but like one of the things that came out of it was every day we used to have that tracker that used to come out. And it used to tell number of infections per province, number of deaths per province, etc. And to me, that was a very good example of what was missing in South Africa was like real world data to inform decision making around that. So that COVID tracker, and I think people started to do some quite clever things with it. Their Power BI dashboards and whatever, but people could make an informed decision about when infections hit this level, we would be able to respond accordingly. And I think what's quite nice that I think we're starting to see in South Africa is like more sophistication around decision making and what success looks like. There's a thing called Operation Vulindlela, which basically gave some of the strategic high level things that South Africa needed to achieve over a period of time. One example of that is keeping the lights on and how many days of no load shedding. And like I appreciate definition of load shedding is contentious in South Africa, but effectively, I think we've gone 320 days without load shedding in South Africa. That's how you start to build confidence. So when you're at stage 6 and you're working out how you're going to spend 12 hours of your day with no electricity as a small business owner, am I putting in solar? Am I running generators? Whatever. You can't make an informed decision. So, Vulindlela very much pushed the keeping electricity on. Then they started to tackle things like the ports and that. So if I was going to do it, I would find people to give measurable dashboards that we could go and aim at. And one of our clients pointed out the other day, there was a stat from Transnet. They get hammered because they really struggle as a state-owned entity. They pushed through the number of containers that they managed to push through was the highest in 7 years. I think it was 2 months back. So like then you start saying, okay, cool, I can see measurable progress. And I think if we do more of that kind of stuff, we can, we'll be an informed society. And I think that we miss out on sometimes.
What would you measure? Like, what are two things that you would measure that you think like, okay, cool, this is going to help turn the country around?
Um, it's like you have these short term and these long term things. Like there's some short term things like just having the number of potholes filled is an example. So I think you probably need to like divide up things like infrastructure. So how many days of no load shedding, nice and easy. But like, what is the amount of excess electricity being created? Water is obviously a big topic at the moment in South Africa. So, what are we doing? How much are we spending and what are the maintenance around water? Um, one of the, so if you look at the messaging, like I'm a big believer in kind of messaging around if you can tell a good story, like 3 years ago, if you said you worked for Eskom, you were the most hated person in South Africa. Today, that leadership team is one of the most respected because, however, hell or high water, they've managed to go and turn it around. And people are rallying behind Eskom now, saying, "Okay, cool. Now, how do we take your business model forward?" So yeah, probably infrastructure and then also just these easy things that you can measure. I mean, crime, I think is obviously contact crime would maybe be something that'd be interesting to review. We're good at like that hyper local, but can we measure it and tell people where to look?
Hmm.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean it's a difficult question to answer, like obviously I was just throwing you on the spot there, but like
Yeah.
yeah, it's I mean, I guess if you gave yourself a list of like 10 things, um, you know, I mean, yes, South Africa, I always see South Africa as like having insane potential, and I'm not saying we don't perform now, like but we really could be absolutely world class at so many things, right? And I don't know if South Africans quite believe that themselves. So that's where also the storytelling and almost what you're saying a little bit is like it's like a confidence thing, right? We somehow need to start believing in ourselves as a nation the same way we believe, say, in our rugby team. You know what I
So
mean? Yeah.
rugby is an excellent example because they've got a narrative around them. Everyone's bought into Rassie. Our entire psyche, on Monday morning this week, men's rugby lost, ladies rugby lost, Brad Binder lost, and the cricket we got absolutely demolished. So like we're all negative, but I can promise you that if we win against New Zealand on Saturday morning, Monday morning comes around, South Africa will be feeling good vibes, and it's like, but that side believes it can be the best in the world. And for a long time, South Africa did think it could be the best in the world, and we've lost a little bit of that. We've become so inwardly focused rather than and that, I think we were saying it earlier, by being exposed to the best in the world, you start to be, you want to benchmark yourself against the best in the world. We have become so inwardly focused. We just say, well, Cape Town's better than Joburg. I mean, I know it's the most common one at the moment, but, we shouldn't be saying Cape Town's better than Joburg. We should say, Joburg should be comparable to London or whatever it might be. And it shouldn't just be, okay, well, Cape Town's a pocket of excellence.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, yeah, I mean, imagine if we all were like working towards some of the same goals, and like we had this kind of motto as a country, like we're going to be the I don't know, whatever it is, you know what I mean? Like, we're gonna make Joburg the number one financial capital in the world, for example, um, like imagine if we just like we sort of had that kind of messaging. Yeah, it would be so powerful.
But
Um,
we did have it. I mean, that's the thing that I think frustrates a lot of people in probably our age group because, post 1994, we had the best performing stock market for, I stand corrected, and I appreciate it comes off a low base. We were destination of choice for inbound financial investment. We had companies going all over the world, whether it was China or US, Australia. Okay, they've had mixed results, but they did believe they were formed part of it. We had companies like SAB Miller, it was one of the best brewers in the world. We managed to take on the world and Anglo American. We're the Glencore guys, all South Africans as well for a period of time. So we did believe we could do it, and somewhere along the line, and that's why I say I think our generation is quite interesting because it's caught between what it remembers and becoming demotivated about where we used to be this good. And yeah, maybe we do need to just kind of get a few wins on the board again.
Yeah, no, absolutely, bud. So, but as we kind of like just sort of finish off here, what are you most excited about for the future? And if people want to get in touch with you, how can they touch base?
Yeah, so today, these days, I run a consulting business. We primarily do B2B comms, and kind of PR, primarily B2B for investor type relations. But yeah, reasons like I want my kids to grow up in a world where like South Africa's cool. My kids we have a bit of a weird setup, but my oldest is a 27-year-old who was Paula's original daughter when we adopted a young white kid who is now 22, 2023, and like I want him to have a future. We fostered a young Zulu girl. She's now 22, 21, 21, 2022. She also wants a future. How do we go and make it that these kids are the ones who see an opportunity rather than hard work out there? You can work hard, but it doesn't, there should be opportunity. We shouldn't be sitting here with 40% unemployment. We should be building stuff. And I think we just forgotten that along the way. So yeah, if I wanted to say something about where I want the future, yeah, I want a country that works.
For sure. And if people are interested in getting in touch with you,
Yeah, sure. So, you can find me on LinkedIn, Twitter or X or whatever you want to call it. So it's Mark, surname's Ashton. Email address, Mark with a C, and then at Decusatio, DECUSATIO.coza. But yeah, find me around. I'm always open for a coffee. Like, please get me out from behind a desk because it would be nice to be able to go and talk to real people as well. So
yeah,
yeah, absolutely.
awesome, buddy. And then my last question is, what does being ridiculously human mean to you?
Um, Fallibility, I guess. I think the fact that you can fail, and you shouldn't see it as I think who was it? Mark Barnes. So Mark is one of the CEOs I interviewed, and he was the CEO. He was kind of touted to be an exec at Standard Bank at one point in time. He worked in private equity, I think, with Brait for a bit. So he was he was a very successful guy. But I went to interview him the one day for Fin Week, and we did a cover story on him. And he said, like, the thing about it that he introduced himself. He said, I'm Mark, and I was previously rich and famous. And it's always just resonated with me because you want to be famous, you think that, but you realize that life gets in the way, whether it's kids, whether it's your professional life, whether it is family, whatever happens, things are going to get in the way. And it's not about being rich and famous, it's about being fallible and being able to bounce back from it.
Yeah, no, I like that a lot. That's very cool, bud. So, man, I just want to say a huge thanks for coming on the show. Yeah, man, who would have thought, say, like 32 years later, here we are speaking and kind of trying to make a bit of sense, hopefully making a bit of sense, trying to make sense of the world. But it was just really fascinating just listening to you and your perspective, because obviously I haven't lived here for, pretty much my whole adult life. And, hearing someone who's like really been a part of, the country, has a deep understanding, like, of like things economically. It's just been really interesting. So, man, I thank you so much. And yeah, keep smiling, brother. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Cheers, man.